Good evening, everyone. My name is Marlene Wagner, and we're here tonight for the Grays Harbor and Willapa Bay Fisheries Discussion Meeting number 2. I'm just going to wait a minute or so here until our participant list starts leveling off, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Okay, Marlene, it looks like the people that have joined, we've all leveled off. People will probably keep trickling in, but I think that we've got the main people that were here waiting.
Thank you, Leah. Okay, then I will go ahead and get started now. Good evening. My name is Marlene Wagner, and I am the agency's South Coast Policy Lead. We're here tonight to share fishery proposals for the 2025 salmon season and to hear your thoughts on these proposals and also to hear any additional fishery proposals you might have this evening for us. I've got a number of staff with me here tonight, including regional and marine fish biologists for Grays Harbor and Willapa Bay, who are also going to be helping me with this presentation. Next slide. So before we get into the meat of it, I'm just going to quickly review our Zoom meeting guidelines and etiquette. So upon joining this virtual meeting, your microphone will be muted automatically. In case of any technical issues during the meeting, notify us in the chat and we will help you. Please note that the chat will only be monitored for technical assistance. Public comments are welcome and will be rotated between people who raise their hand. To ask a question or to make a comment, please use your device's raise hand feature. If you're on the phone, dial *9. If using a computer, click the hand reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. During the comment period, the host will enable you to unmute yourself. You can then unmute yourself by pressing the mute button on your device or dialing *6 on your phone. Please keep discussions focused on the agenda items and questions at hand. Offensive, disrespectful, or derogatory language, including profanity, personal attacks, threats, or insults towards individuals, governments, or organizations is strictly prohibited. Assume positive intentions from those speaking and listen respectfully. To ensure balanced discussion, please limit your comments to 2 minutes with one clarifying follow-up question. Provide constructive feedback regarding the fisheries in which you participate. Remember that the most compelling comments are those that pertain to the topics under discussion. Staff may close the public comment to stay on schedule with the agenda. This meeting will be recorded and posted online. And if you do have further comments or questions, you can submit them in written format on our public comment webpage, which is, you can find at the link here at the bottom. Next slide. So I'm going to briefly review our North of Falcon process that we covered more extensively in our last meeting, and also at North of Falcon 1. So we start by forecasting the abundance of each stock and determine if there's a harvestable surplus. We model these fisheries to determine constraining stocks. Then we predict what we will catch, and depending on the area, we negotiate with our co-managers and other states on allocation. Next slide. So here's the remainder of the North of Falcon public meeting schedule, the regional public meeting. I'm sorry, I'm pausing because I'm seeing some comments. Are we doing good there, Leah?
Yep, we've got it taken care of.
Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so since we last met, we held our North of Falcon meeting number 1 in Olympia on March 19th. We just wrapped up North of Falcon 2 in Linwood, Washington last week on March 25th. We're here tonight on April 2nd for our second joint Willapa Bay and Grays Harbor fisheries discussion. Next week from April 10th to 15th in San Jose, California, we're going to head to the second Pacific Fishery Management Council meeting to develop final fisheries packages. If you'd like to see the entire statewide schedule, the link at the bottom of this slide will take you to the whole suite of meetings held during North of Falcon, as well as the materials that have been provided for each meeting. And so with that, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Mike Scharf, who is going to talk about Grays Harbor management objectives and fisheries proposals. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Scharf. I'm a fisheries biologist who've been around for quite a while. So welcome and thanks for joining us tonight. I want to start out by letting you know that we have not had an official exchange of preliminary fishing packages with the Quinault tribe at this point in time. We understand that by now we typically do have this and we have a better idea of where we're sitting, but we aren't there yet. And I know that we would all like to see a little more progress, but we have to move on and see what we can do. And I also want to stress that PFMC2 starts next week with the final package due in front of the council on Tuesday, the 15th. And so there's a lot of things that are going to have to happen between now and then. So there's going to be a lot of fluid things happening. So with that said, and the understanding that what we present today might not be quite as fine-tuned as we were hoping, we want to try to keep you guys informed as we are down in California. Haven't quite figured out exactly how best to do this, but we're thinking maybe we can get some sort of something together Sunday, I think it's the 12th or the 13th. We might have a little bit better idea then, but please bear with us and understand that we'd like to keep you guys involved. And so also, it's going to have to be a quick turnaround. So we're going to try to make sure that we can get everybody informed with enough time to join us if we can get something set up. So pay attention to the email and web-based things for more information about us trying to get you guys one more chance to review and help us shape these fisheries as we move forward. So sorry about that. It is what it is. So with that being said, as we move forward, next slide, please. We actually have done a lot of work putting together some fishing packages. We use these management objectives and the information that we have received from you via the meeting we had a couple of weeks ago, and things sent in on the web portal and email. But I want to review these really quick, these management objectives. We went through them last time, but we're going to hit them again. So as you remember, spring Chinook, our forecast was just a little bit above the escapement goal. And with the uncertainty in the genetic makeup of this early timed fish, and with the pending listing as an ESA stock, we were a little concerned, so we thought that conservation was the best move this year and not propose a fishery on spring Chinook. For our other stocks, our management objective is to achieve the natural spawning escapement goal. But we do have one more thing to look at for coho and Grays Harbor, based on its forecasted abundance. There is a maximum exploitation rate that is established under the Pacific Salmon Treaty. Basically, it looks at ocean abundance forecasts and then calculates a harvest rate that can occur to achieve the escapement goal. So currently, with this year's forecasted abundance, that ER is right about 50%, and kind of give a little perspective on what that is. Last year's final FRAM run put Grays Harbor coho at a 57% harvest rate. And then for Queets coho, manage that to an escapement goal. So hopefully we can get basically the same kind of season we had last year for the Queets. So before I dive into the models, kind of want to review some of the comments that we heard over the past week and a half or so. I'm not going to read through these. There's a whole bunch of them up there, but kind of the general understanding that we received was that people would prefer to have a longer season as opposed to a bigger bag. So basically, don't shorten the season to try to get an extra fish in the bag. And we heard that over again. And we also heard that bait in December is pretty important. We also heard that if we need to extend the season, mark selective fisheries are an option that people liked. We also heard that if we could, provide 2 coho limit, but restrict it to 1 wild fish. We also heard a couple of comments about the jack fishery in the lower Chehalis. There was some concern about adult encounters, and some suggestions on how we might limit those. And we also had a suggestion to retain adult hatchery coho during that time period. And I do have to say that we did also receive some commercial inputs. One of them was to look at some time in area 2B to target some chum. Did some work on that. Did not find that would provide us any savings in coho and chinook. So if we put any time out in 2B, we would have to remove some time out of 2A and 2D. So with that being said, I think it's time to look at a couple of the models that we put together and just a quick short discussion on those. So if we go to the next slide. So we decided that we'll just name them A and B. So the first column there is 2024 fisheries. So our goal here was work on trying to achieve our escapement objectives and lower our impacts on coho based on our limitations under the Pacific Salmon Treaty. So Model A looked at how can we reduce some of our coho impacts. And so what we thought we would do is just, if you remember last year, we went to a 1 fish limit in December. So we thought we would just move that up to have a 1 fish limit start in November. And so the basic framework would be 2 fish through October, then 1 fish November, December. And we decided that into area 2.2 out in the bay, that we would drop to 1 fish in November. Didn't do anything on the hub tulip side. We decided that, we reduced some opportunity there last year on our Chinook retention. We lost a week over there, and it's already a 1 fish bag. So we thought we would leave hub tulips alone. And then we did some rearranging of the non-treaty commercial schedule. We took a couple of days that were earlier in the season, the late September, early October, moved those down into the mid to late October and early November to target chum. So, and then we also put together a Model B just to see how much further we would have to go to reduce some impacts on our coho. So we basically just did a kind of a one and done format where it throughout the whole basin, 1 fish release Chinook throughout the season. So in area 2.2, starting September 16th through the November 30th, 1 fish bag release Chinook. Hub tulip stays the same. Chehalis and the tributaries, starting whenever the season opens, September 16th or October 1st, 1 fish bag. Through the 30th of October, release adult Chinook. After the 30th of October, release all Chinook. So it's a 1 fish bag. So those were the 2 models that we thought we should share, and then in the next slide we can take a look at what the results of those modeling exercises look like. I struggled in my preparation for this particular slide, and I say this because there is still some uncertainty there and there's still work to do, but in general, if you look at the PSTER under Model A, we lowered that down to 52.9%. Still not down to 50%, but it's moving the right direction. And you'll see the resulting escapement's only 33 to 58. Model B gets us even closer. That brings down the total ER, sorry, to 50.4. And still not quite at the escapement goal yet. And as we sit right now, none of these models, and remember, it has last year's Quinault schedule still in it. We don't achieve the escapement goal for Chinook. And the results on the non-treaty commercial side is that, yes, we lose some opportunity for coho, but we're gaining quite a bit of chum opportunity. Again, I caution how we approach this, in that we know that there will be some things turning here and there. And that's why I encourage you guys to stay tuned as we head down to California and we get this finished up. But at this point, I think that's all I have to provide, and just we'll hang around for questions afterwards. I think next up is, I don't know who's next. Next.
It's me.
Well, welcome, Erin.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. Hi, I'm Erin Woodcop. I'm the district fish biologist for the Willapa Bay. And now we'll go over some of the public comments we received and our management objectives for the Willapa Bay, as well as fisheries proposals that we've put together. So to remind everyone what our management objectives are in the Willapa Bay, first, for Chinook, we managed to a 20% natural origin impact rate cap for both the Willapa and Nassau rivers. And just to remind folks from our previous meeting, currently we are forecasting to be below our escapement goal for natural origin spawners for Chinook, with a forecasted return of 2,338 fish. So we are pretty far below our natural origin escapement goal. But our overarching management is this 20% impact rate cap. For chum, we managed to an escapement goal of 35,400 natural origin fish. And similar to last year, we're forecasting to be well above that escapement goal, with a forecasted total of 94,464 fish. So far exceeding that goal, which is good news. And for coho, we managed to an escapement goal, an aggregated escapement goal of 17,200 naturally spawning fish. And we also have an internal WDFW goal of 13,600 natural origin spawners. And we are predicting this year in our forecasting that we will meet both this aggregated goal as well as our internal fish and wildlife goal. So that's good news. Next slide, please. Okay, we got several, lots of great public comments. Thanks everyone for participating and providing these. First, in general, we heard concern for natural origin Chinook impacts due to our lower forecasted returns. And we also heard requests for increasing the recreational NOR impact rate. For the commercial fishery, we had some specific requests to allow use of one recovery box or one chamber in November and allow for additional days of fishing after September 15th. For the Nassau River, we received a variety of specific proposals, including banning professional fishing rafts in particular sections, prohibiting fishing from a floating device up to the Big Hill Bridge, keeping the current closure of the section from Highway 4 Bridge to the hatchery until October 16th. We also received requests for implementing a bobber rule to reduce snagging on the lower river and only keeping fish hooked in the mouth from August 1 to October 15th. And finally, we received proposals on the Nassau and Willapa both to allow retention of one natural coho. Unlike last year, where we did not allow retention of natural coho on these rivers, we had some concerns with natural origin spawner returns on these rivers that we've been thinking about and still have in our minds as we're working to manage to our overall goal. And wanted to point out that while we take all these proposals very seriously, there are a couple that we are in particular considering. We are looking at heavily this potentially returning to one wild coho retention on the Nassau and Willapa rivers. We are also looking at allowing use of only one recovery box or one chamber in a 2-chamber recovery box in November. And we're also strongly considering implementing this bobber rule which is the bait or lure must be suspended by a float. And we're looking at that specifically from August 1 to October 15th from the South Fork to the Highway 4 bridge on the Nassau River. So hopefully with those proposals in mind and thinking about these public comments that we've received at the end of the meeting, you all can provide your thoughts to us. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to my colleague, Barbara McClellan, who's going to go over our specific fisheries models.
Everyone, how are you doing tonight? Like Erin said, my name is Barbara McClellan. I'm one of the area bios here in Grace Harbor and Willapa, and I'm going to walk you through our fishery models that we're sharing for Willapa tonight. I want to start with sharing a few things before we get into the models. So first, we have received a commercial fishery proposal, but it is based on the NALF model, which is the New Abundance last year's fishery model. We shared this model at our first fishery discussion on March 12th, but I will walk you through that again tonight just for reference. The commercial fishery proposal that we did receive is going to be included, it is included, I'm sorry, in the two new models that you see here on the screen, B and C. And the only difference between B and C models is a change in the recreational freshwater fishery. So I also want to mention that all three of these models have the section below the weir downstream to Highway 4 bridge in the Nassau closed until mid-October, and the Niawakam River and Fort Creek are closed to salmon fishing, so that I don't have to repeat that again for each one of these models. So looking at the models on the screen, you'll see on the left side, you've got each model run. For model A, that is the NALF model that we presented on our first meeting on March 12th. And as Erin said, our management objective for natural origin Chinook is to meet and not exceed the 20% natural origin Chinook impacts for Nassau and Willapa rivers separately. So based on model A, you'll see there that Willapa River is expected to have a Chinook impact rate of 14.9% and Nassau River at 16.6%. So the next three columns in this table represent expected escapement. As Erin mentioned, our escapement goal for natural origin Chinook is 43.53. Even though we model and our objective is the 20%, we do look at the escapement goal and whether we're meeting that. And in this particular model, the expected natural origin Chinook escapement is 1984, which is below the 43.53. So for coho, as Erin mentioned in the previous slide, we have a naturally spawning escapement goal for Willapa Bay Basin, and that goal has been accepted through PFMC, and that number is 17,200 fish, and you can see that in the title there. The natural origin escapement, which is an internal objective from the commission, is 13,600 coho. So based on this model particular one for the NALF, we expect to escape just over 52,000 naturally spawning coho, and then approximately 15,400 natural origin coho, and that's the number in the parentheses. So based on this model, we expect to achieve both the naturally spawning escapement and the natural origin escapement. So for chum, we have a basin-wide escapement of 35,400, and in this model, we expect to escape from these fisheries approximately 52,000 fish. So the remaining parts of this table have to do with expected harvest by sector and species in terms of commercial and recreational. And then the last four columns are the percentages of those expected harvest. So for Chinook, you can see that the recreational fishery is expected to harvest approximately 4,200, oh my gosh, 4,200 hatchery Chinook. And since we're marked selective on Chinook, these two columns right here represent just hatchery harvest. So the commercial fishery is expected to harvest approximately 5,300 fish. And you can see just to the right, that splits into 44% to 56% between the two sectors. For coho, the model estimates approximately 6,236 coho to the recreational fishery, and that's approximately 14.9% of the total expected harvest. And this model estimates approximately 35,478 coho will be harvested by the commercial sector, which is about 85% of the total harvest expected for the harbor. So for chum, the recreational sector doesn't really harvest that many chums. So the expected harvest in this model is about 143 fish. but the commercial sector is expected to harvest around 42,000. And I didn't add the allocation for chum since the recreational piece is so small. So model B, and this is the first model, the first new model that we're proposing and we're sharing tonight. This model represents the same marine recreational fishery as in model A, which is the same as last year. But it changes the commercial fishery and the recreational freshwater fishery. So in this model, the commercial fishery schedule is the proposed schedule that we received from the commercial sector. And the recreational freshwater fishery has been adjusted to a 2 fish daily limit, releasing only wild Chinook, meaning that you could keep 2 wild coho, 2 hatchery Chinook, 2 hatchery coho. So based on this model, you can see that compared to the 20% objective, we're at 19.9% on Willapa River and 19.8% on Nasal River. And so moving into escapement, we've got 1,897 natural origin Chinook expected to be escaped into the fishery, from the fishery, and that's still well below the 4,353. For coho, this model, we expect to escape just over 43,000 naturally spawning coho, which is the number not in parentheses, and then 13,103 natural origin coho, which is the number inside the parentheses. So this model is suggesting that we will achieve the naturally spawning escapement goal of 17,200, but not the natural origin escapement goal of 13,600. That's why the 13,000 is in parentheses, to just remind us all that that didn't make the goal. For chum, this model expects to escape around 39,800 fish for chum. So as I said before, the remaining columns in this table just represent harvest and allocation. So you can see the split between the commercial and the recreational sectors for both Chinook and coho. And based on these splits in this particular fishery in this model, you can see that 56% of the Chinook harvest goes to the recreational sector and 44% is harvested by the by the commercial sector, and 44% are harvested by the recreational sector. And for coho, 84% is harvested by the commercial sector and 15.7% is harvested by the recreational sector. So in model C, this is our second of our proposed models here that we're sharing tonight. While we manage coho in the aggregate in Willapa Bay, as Aaron mentioned before, we do look at individual basin data, and we still have concerns for wild coho, particularly in Willapa and Nasal rivers. So in this model, which is labeled model C, you can see that this model represents a change in the recreational freshwater fishery from model B, which was a 2 fish daily limit and no release of coho. This particular model is a 2 fish daily limit with 1 wild coho only to be retained and still releasing unmarked Chinook. The commercial and the marine recreational fisheries in model C is the same as in model B. So based on that, you can see that relative to the natural Chinook impact rate, we're still at 19.9 and 19.8 for Willapa and Nasal respectively. We're showing an 1,897 natural origin Chinook expected escapement, still well below the 4,353. This model expects to escape just over 44,000 naturally spawning coho and 13,900 natural origin coho. So this model expects to achieve both the naturally spawning and the natural origin. For chum, the expected chum escapement in this model from these fisheries is 39,889 fish. So again, the remaining columns are harvest by sector and the splits, and you can see that by reducing by 1 daily or 1 wild coho in the daily limit, you can see that the catch gets reduced a little bit in coho. The harvest of hatchery Chinook remains the same between both the recreational and the commercial fisheries, but recreational coho drops a little bit from the 8,130 down to the 7,300. So you can see those splits there. And at the bottom of that screen, you can see the sort of the description of each fishery, just for your reference, if you wanted to understand what each model is. So next slide. So this slide just represents the fisheries that I just shared, but relative to regulations. So for all 3 models, you can see that the marine recreational fishery does not change. It remains at a 2 fish daily limit, releasing wild Chinook starting August 1st. And that's the same throughout all 3 models. For model A, which is the NALF, last year's fishery had a 2 fish daily limit in the freshwater areas, but some of those fisheries had a 1 wild coho retention, while other systems had to release all their wild coho. So that's represented in the cell that you see there that says 0 or 1 for natural coho daily limit. And then the commercial fishery is there described based on whatever they fished last year. So model B, the marine recreational fishery is still the same as I said before. The freshwater fishery in this model changes to a 2 fish daily limit, only mark selected for Chinook. And you can see the change in that blue cell where there's a 2 compared to where last year it was a 0 or a 1 in the natural coho daily limit. And then for the commercial fishery, based on the proposal that we've received to date, they propose tangle nets being utilized in the south end of the bay in weeks 33 through 37, which is basically August and early September. And then the North Bay areas, they would begin, whenever they begin fishing in week 37, they would have 1 week of tangle net. The commercial fishery has proposed November time, and you can see that time and the weeks there highlighted in blue. Chum retention would be allowed in all 3 fisheries and all 3 models. And based on this model, the ex-vessel value of the commercial fishery would be approximately 1.2 million. So for model C, again, the marine recreational fishery is the same. The commercial fishery in model C is the same as in model B, which is the proposal that we have received from the commercial sector. The change here is the recreational freshwater fishery. It changes from a 2 fish daily limit to a 2 fish daily limit with 1 wild coho allowed. And you can see that change in that highlighted blue box there from a 2 to a 1. So again, chum would be allowed to be retained, and since we didn't make any changes to the commercial fishery, that ex-vessel value hasn't changed that value there. And as Mike mentioned earlier, we know that we have some shaping to do for fisheries. We know that we need to get a single proposal out to you for comment and help so that you can help us shape our fisheries in Willapa Bay. We do leave for PFMC in California next Thursday, but we would like to provide some additional opportunity for you to comment while we're in California, but unsure really when that's going to be. So, we're thinking that we would communicate with you using our email distribution list and to notify you of any potential time that we'd be available to provide you that update and be able to give you that opportunity to provide any additional fishery suggestions while we're in California. It just might be really short notice. So, and it may occur on the weekend as well. So depending on how things go in California. So I would just suggest if you're interested in something like that, pay attention to your emails. I'll be sending out an email probably pretty short notice and pretty quickly, maybe on Sunday, like Mike mentioned. So just keep an eye out and just be patient with us trying to get all of that done while we're in a different state. And remember, we will continue to take public comment or fishery suggestions throughout this process, and that will lead into the rulemaking process, which will continue on through June. If you do have fishery suggestions, I would encourage you to submit those through the online public comment portal. And I believe that link is to submit those suggestions is on the next slide. So I think that's all I have. So I will pass it back to Marlene.
Thanks, Barb. Yeah, so you can see the link here to submit any public comments electronically. I mean, now we'll open the floor for folks to provide any comments or suggestions or questions. Yeah, again, you can raise your hand to ask a question, which you can access through the control panel at the bottom of the screen. You can also raise your hand by hovering over your face or name on the list of participants. Callers can raise their hand by dialing *9, and callers can unmute themselves by pressing *6.
Okay, Marlene, it looks like we have one hand up from a phone number ending in 932. Go ahead. I have sent a prompt for you to unmute. You may need to dial *6.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hey, thank you. This is Ross Barkhurst. I had a comment on commercial seasons. All of them, they say South Bay, and that's really too general. Really good recreational fishery for Chinook is the Nema, and a few years ago, the nets weren't getting what was predicted, and so they got extra days and two in, and that just killed the Nema, which is really our only shot. Most of the Azell is closed, and so would ask that we don't schedule nets for two in without recognizing it just wipe out the recreational fishery, which frequently catches the most. So that's really the big comment I have. We used to have a recreational priority, and now all three of your options give us less than half. And if you go up in two in, it's just a wipeout. So ask you not to do that. I would add that the 3 years, mostly they're going to be 3-year-old fish. 3 years ago, the Nema hatchery did not mate its egg tank. Okay. There's another reason if you're going to let us fish, not to have the nets in front of 2M. South Bay is just too general.
Thank you, Ross.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ross. That was our only hand up for right now. So just a reminder, there's a raise hand function on the bottom of your screen. If your screen has been minimized at all, if it's not full screen, it might be under the More button. Also, it could be Reactions tab, just depending on your version. Looks like we have a couple hands up now. Eric, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
All right, good evening. Just a quick clarification question. Would it be possible for you to go back to the Willapa Bay fishery proposal slide that had the three? Yes, that one right there. Down at the bottom, the very bottom of the slide, they have model A, B, C, and talking about what's encompassed with each model. And my clarification question was the model A NELF, where they, as you read across it there, it says recreational fresh water, and they list all the different river tributaries. They don't mention North River, and that was open.
So the reason it's not mentioned is at the end of that sentence, it says mark selective NOR coho. So those are the systems that were release of unmarked wild coho.
Okay, I think North River had one wild retention last year, though.
Yes, so I only listed the systems that were released, where the release was required.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you. That's all I had.
I just realized I was talking the whole time and I was muted. I apologize. Our next hand is from Jacob. Jacob, go ahead.
Hey, thanks everybody for taking the time to put this meeting together tonight and show us the different models for options we have this year. I had a comment for Willapa Bay. I'm liking the way Model A, the NALF model, looks the best, but I'm wondering if maybe we could tweak it a little bit for this year. I had a change in mind for both the commercial and the recreational side of things. And that would be to give commercial week 46 in 2U, and then keep it marked selective in the freshwater, besides those couple of streams where it was not marked selective for one fish. But then add a bonus coho in our rivers where we have hatcheries, where we have a very high number of hatchery fish that we surplus. And as we can see in the slide that's before this, I think the commercial crushes the recreational for coho, which is totally fine. I think it'd be a good idea maybe to let some of the sportsmen who commonly limit out. They can only harvest fish maybe a few days of the week. You know, the run's only good, really push and good with fresh fish for, you know, maybe a week or two period, twice a fall. Taking a bonus coho home in the nacelle and the Willapa doesn't seem like it would be doing any harm at all. So yeah, just a little bit of a bone there for commercial if we stayed on Model A, and then also a little bit of bonus for the sportsman harvesting hatchery coho for that bonus fish in the Rivers with Hatcheries programs. And I think that would be all, besides the fact that I hope we consider the different reg proposals such as bobber restrictions, or using only a bobber and suspending bait. I think there's been places in this state where they've done that successfully. Samish River comes to mind, really bad snagging problem. We got to get creative on how to fix that, or solve that. And I think they were trying that there with some success. And I think I'd like to see that in other places along the coast too. It would probably benefit those fisheries. But yeah, that's what I have for now. Appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. Our next hand and last hand for the moment is from a phone number ending in 445. Go ahead.
I've got a few questions about or comments, I guess, about models A, B, and C for the Willapa for coho. It appears a couple of those models are allowing retention of a natural, but it's restricting the number of hatchery fish, where Model C allows a 2-fish bag with 1 natural. And, you know, I see some problems with models A and B, as I think they would impact PHOS. They'd reduce harvest, and I think they would dramatically increase surplus fish. So I just think that Model C is the right way to go, and I strongly recommend that you go with that for the coho. I also want to comment about the bobber rule that Aaron alluded to. I'm ecstatic that the staff is actually looking at a solution to the problems there on the lower nacelle, and I just please make that happen. Something's got to change there, and this might be what it takes. And then Erin alluded to some things that they were looking at, but she didn't allude to some things that I requested. I think I know the answer, but I just need to ask. Because I did request a rule change on what was considered a legally hooked fish, which would be consistent with the whack in the mouth if you're attempting to snag. Also, restricting fishing from a floating device above the hatchery since you didn't bring it up, Aaron, are you telling me that that's probably not something you're going to consider?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Steve, for your comments. I did want to start just kind of in order from some of the things you mentioned. For the proposals, models A, B, and C, I did want to clarify, you mentioned that we had maybe changed around the hatchery bag limit. All 3 of those models had a 2 adult hatchery limit. If that clarifies anything for you there. But in regards,
okay, they allowed. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, one of the models I thought allowed a 2-fish bag on naturals.
So that would be, Nick, can you change the slide to go to the models? So model B was a 2-fish bag total. You're correct. So that would be either 2 hatchery fish. Would be marked selected for Chinook, so you couldn't keep any wild Chinook, but you could keep 2 natural coho in the model B. or 2 hatchery,
Yeah, and
depending on what you got.
that's where my point about PHOS, harvest, all those things come into play, because, you know, if someone takes two wilds, the coho, the natural, or the hatchery fish are swimming upriver. I just think the Model C is really a better way of approaching this. It would allow harvest. There'd be some impact on PHOS. It would also allow retention of a wild fish.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Well, yeah, we got your comments noted. Model C is more conservative for only keeping 1 wild coho compared to Model B. In response to your other comments, if you go back, Nick, to the proposal slide. So you mentioned it's on the comment about it's unlawful to possess a fish not hooked in the mouth. And you also mentioned banning fishing from a floating device. Currently, we're not considering any rule changes regarding the language about being hooked in the mouth. We're hoping we've got this anti-snagging rule on the books currently, and we're hoping that this bobber rule, in addition, would help address that snagging issue in the lower Nassau River. And regarding the floating device, we're currently not considering banning fishing from a floating device in that area. And yeah, we totally hear everyone's comments about boats. You know, lots of boats. It's a busy, highly trafficked river, and it can get complicated with gear conflict. But we don't have the power to ban the use of boats. So prohibiting fishing from a floating device wouldn't really reduce boat congestion. People would just not fish from their boat, and they would get out and fish from the bank. And there's still the same concerns with trespassing and public access and crowding of the river. Just people are standing on the bank instead of fishing in their boat. And yeah, we just don't feel like that really would
Okay,
help,
hey,
would help the
you know,
problem.
I just wanted to be sure that, you know, it's something you're not going to pursue, and that's perfectly fine. Hey, I do have a suggestion, because the conditional use permit for the Nassau, the hearing for that was on Monday, which is telling me we're moving forward. That project's going to happen. And I see, based on my own experiences on that river, a distinct difference between what's going to happen below the hatchery and what's going to happen above. So I would recommend that you consider making a separate catch record code for the area above the hatchery, so that you know as we move forward where the fish are being harvested and what impact that's having, so that you know, seasons can be set appropriately.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that suggestion. We'll keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Steve. That was our last hand for right now. There was another one. Okay, caller ending in 932. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Ralph Walters again, and talk about coho and the NEMA. We have a wild run, but you know, the coho, or the nets keep oodles of wild coho right out in front, including in 2 and we're not allowed to have any. And I would, the run is late. There's not very many people fishing, but once in a while, when you're chum fishing late, you catch a wild coho, and with all the wild coho that are being killed commercially, I would ask that you allow 1 wild coho per day in the North Nema River.
Okay, thank you, Ross. Looks like we have another hand up, and this is from Lance. Lance, go ahead.
Yellow. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, I'm gonna fire this one at Mike Sharp. Wish I could see your face, Mike, but at the last meeting, I believe you told us you had moved on to another job and you were filling in for this job. And I'd like to say thank you very much for dealing with what you're dealing with, having been that you've moved on to another job. So I'm sure that what you're doing is not a lot of fun for not
For
supposed
you-
to be there.
For
So
you guys, I'd come back anytime.
thank you very much for all the work and the bad situation we're in right now in that area. So, and then the only thing I wanted to say was that I would back, or whatever, I approve of the option C for the Willapa Bay, knowing full well that just because we make these predictions and we throw this thing out there in April, that things may change and the numbers may change. So for right now, for April's fishery, I will back option C, and let's just see where it goes when it happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Our next hand is from Nathan. Nathan, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks everyone for putting the meeting together. Mike, once again, thanks for doing the putting their time in and doing your work. You're always a credit to the team. I think I'm a fan of option C as well. It puts us near the thresholds for most things, but it does allow the maximum opportunity for the fishermen to get in there, and it does allow for one of the wild cohos to be retained. So with that being said, my comment was more on the fisheries, the regulations for Willapa Bay. I saw that there was a comment there about professional raft fishing. I really like the idea of this. This is the first I've heard from Fish and Wildlife, and I hope that as we move into our steelhead seasons and other stocks that are close to being listed, or we're having continual problems with escapement, I hope the department continues to think of this as a possible regulation to provide those fish a little more comfort and take a little bit of pressure off them, especially in the upper end of some of these rivers that we're talking about here. So that's my only comment. Thank you very much, guys, for all your hard work.
Thank you, Nathan. Our next hand is from Paul. Paul, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm here. Sounds like there's a lot of effort being made to protect the coho on the recreational side, which is great. But it sounds like the wrecks are catching a much smaller percentage of the fish, and the commercials are getting 80-some%. So I'm just questioning whether, it's the right approach to put all the effort on the wrecks without doing any tweaking to the commercial side of things, where if you've got commercial guys catching 80-some%, I would think you could make an adjustment there and have a bigger impact. Not sure if those things are being looked at. I do understand that the commercial fishery is supposed to get priority on coho. And talking about fishing out of a raft, while it would be nice to have everybody fish from the bank, provide protection from fish in that way, property owners are just not that willing to let people on and fish. So with everyone paying for these hatcheries to produce fish, it being a natural resource that is supposed to be for the community as a whole, fishing out of a raft or some sort of boat is a way to allow people to fish without having as many conflicts for trespassing. So just some thoughts I had. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And that was our last hand for the moment. Just a reminder, folks on the phone, raise your hand by dialing *9. Raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. Marlene, it looks like we might not have any more hands.
Thank you, Leah. And thank you, everybody, for participating tonight. We're really happy to hear your suggestions and grateful for your participation. I just want to remind you again, if you have any other comments, please submit them electronically at our public portal with the link on the screen. And we're always happy to hear from you. And we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.